From the dawn of civilization, the bros have been asking themselves one question. How many reps do I need to build muscle? This question has troubled many fellow lifters and has driven people insane, dividing them into multiple factions. You have the power lifters who worship the 4 to 6 rep range, the bodybuilders who worship the 8 to 12 rep range, that weird kid in the corner who thinks 15 to 20 reps are the best, and the calisthenics enthusiast who will die to protect the honor of 50 to 100 million rep range. Let's see if today we can figure out which one of these is the correct answer, or if there is any other rep range that is best for hypertrophy. It's anywhere between 5 to 30 reps, with the last few reps being close to failure. That's it. Goodbye. Okay, so yes, theoretically the rep range is around 5 to 30. But there are a lot of caveats to that due to the rep range being so wide. There are a few things to consider before selecting rep ranges. Of course, there's the 5 to 30 rep range which I talked about just now, but that doesn't mean you can't grow muscle with sets of 3 or even 50. It just means that the 5 to 30 rep range is well suited for the vast amount of people or the vast majority of people and exercises. Now, where does this 5 to 30 rep range even come from? If you actually think about your training and break it down into smaller fragments, you will realize that there are actually 4 factors that determine what rep range or rep ranges you should use in your training. Let's start with exercise selection. Okay, so I'm gonna let you guys choose which one of these sentences makes more sense to you. 4 sets of 20 rep squats followed by 3 sets of 8 rep leg extensions, or 4 sets of 8 rep squats followed by 3 sets of 20 rep leg extensions. Well, if you are someone who does not enjoy pain and wants to retain their ability to walk, you probably chose the second one. And that's exactly why the 5 to 30 rep range is very much dependent on the exercise that you are doing. In bigger compound movements like the squats, overhead press, barbell rows, or the Romanian deadlifts, shooting for really high reps might not be a good idea because your supporting musculature or your cardio might get tired first, hence limiting you from stimulating the target muscle properly. For example, many people gas out during high rep squats or fail their Romanian deadlifts due to their lower back being fatigued and not their hamstrings. Effort basically means your proximity to failure, which means how close or how far you are to failing the set. It is usually gauged using tools like RIR or RPE, which are basically metrics to determine how hard your set was. I will go in depth about them in some other video, but to simplify things, the higher your reps are in a set, the closer you need to be to failure. Yes, you also need to be close to failure if you go below 5 reps, but in a specific scenario. But to understand that, you need to understand our next point, which is intensity. Now, many people think that effort and intensity are the same thing, but they actually aren't. Like we just discussed, effort is your proximity to failure, but intensity is simply just how heavy your set was and not how difficult it was. Intensity is basically the load or the weight you are using relative to your 1 rep max. A set of 6 with 85% means that you will be using 85% of 1 rep max in that set. So a 300 pound bench presser will be using around 225 pounds in that set for 6 reps. With lighter loads, you obviously need to do more reps to reach momentary muscular failure, but in these higher rep sets, it is especially important that you go close to or to muscle failure. Reason for that is that these sets with lower intensities do not recruit the high threshold motor units or the big fast twitch muscle fibers from the get-go, and they are only properly stimulated when you are reaching or are at failure. But in higher intensities, since you are handling loads that are so close to your maximum capacity, you don't need to go to failure to stimulate the muscles properly. A set with a difficulty of even a 7 or 8 out of 10 will be enough to promote hypertrophy or start promoting hypertrophy. Volume is a tricky topic because the rep range you pick can determine your volume, but sometimes the volume you decide on doing can determine your rep range. That doesn't make much sense now, but hear me out. I'm going to oversimplify things here, but in short, If you go higher or lower than the 5 to 30 rep range, you will need to do more volume to match its muscle building stimulus. 7 sets of 3 can maybe match the stimulus of 3 sets of 10 in terms of hypertrophy, but if your main goal is just muscle building, I will say you should pick the 3 sets of 10 option because it will be much safer for your joints while being less time consuming. In the other end, if you go train with really high reps, even when you are training to failure, the recovery demands of those sets are really low because the fatigue generated in those higher rep sets are mainly just through metabolites. So your body will be able to handle much more volume in training with higher reps. So to sum things up, the 5 to 30 rep range is basically a wide basket where most of the exercises and their applications fit in. So it's not like a set of 3 or 4 with very good execution will not grow any muscle. It's just that a set of 5 or 6 with the same level of execution and effort will be a little bit better, and that little bit adds up to a lot in the long run. Rep ranges also vary a lot in terms of individual preferences. Like I used a 6 to 8 rep range for squats, pull-ups and bench press, the 8 to 15 rep range for dumbbell and machine compound movements, the 10 to 20 rep range for arms, hamstring curls and shoulder isolations, the 15 to 30 rep range for leg extensions, calves, forearms, and sometimes I switch rep ranges for movements periodically or lower them when I am focusing on strength. There is a lot of overlap in the rep ranges and that's actually normal. So that's it. I went through everything I think about before selecting rep ranges for particular exercises. I gave you a big spectrum of rep ranges, which is the 5 to 30 rep range, instead of a specific small rep range like 8 to 12, 10 to 15 or anything like that, because you need to go out there and experiment with your lifting and find out what works best for you while having knowledge of the fundamentals, which I just talked about. So that was it, and I will see you in the next one.